Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us in the 10-minute Bible lesson. We appreciate it. Now we've made it all the way up to Matthew chapter 7. So we're starting in chapter 7. Now we're still in the Sermon on the Mount. But today we're going to be looking at, I think you'll find it an interesting topic because it has to do with what Jesus said about judging. So let's go ahead and get right into it and read the first two verses of Matthew chapter 7. So Jesus says, "Judge not, that you be not judged, for with what judgment you judge, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you." Now, I want to say a little bit before I really start commenting, and what I think Jesus is saying here. To me, this verse is the most misused verse in the whole Bible. I mean, that's kind of my opinion about it. In fact, I would just say it's probably the only verse that unbelievers know or that they've committed to memory. I mean, just think about it. People love to say, "Don't you judge," or "You're not supposed to judge." Have you heard that? It's used an awful lot. And it's used by people that don't really even believe the Bible. At least they say they don't believe in the Bible. So obviously this passage is true, isn't it? Everything that Jesus said is true. In fact, everything in our Bible is true. Our Bible is a reliable book, and it's a reasonable book. But Jesus is saying here, and he's talking about here about people at least interpret it this way, that Jesus is saying that we shouldn't condemn the behavior of others. Now, I would just have to say, really? Is that true? Is that what Jesus is saying? And is that what we're not supposed to do? Well, I believe that Jesus is not saying that we should condemn wrong behavior in others. I'm just going to come right out and say it. That's what I think. I don't really think that's what this verse means. In fact, I think what this verse is saying is this, is that the standard that we apply to others, to other people's behavior, is the standard that will be applied to us. And I think that's fair, isn't it? That's the way it should be. And I think that's kind of what Jesus is saying here. But I think, too, another thing that we need to think about is that we shouldn't be judgmental. Now, I don't mean to confuse you, or I'm not trying to give you double talk, but I do believe that there is a difference between being judgmental and judging. And you may say, "Tom, I don't see the difference," but just bear with me a little bit. So we don't want to have a critical spirit, if you know what I mean. That is to be someone that is always looking for and finding faults in other people or in other things. We need to catch ourselves, because sometimes we can get caught up in that, where we're just kind of negative and critical about everything. So there's a difference between that and judging. Because the truth of the matter is, all of us judge. It's impossible for us not to judge. We're always judging. Every day we judge things. We judge things whether we like them or whether we don't like them. And we also do this. We judge whether we believe something is right or whether we believe that it's wrong. It's just something that we do. So it's a little bit, how can I say this? It's a little bit ridiculous to tell other people not to judge. That's a silly thing, because we all do that. We all pass judgments about things, all kinds of things. And I would even say this, that when someone says, you're not supposed to judge, that in itself is a judgment, if you know what I'm saying. Now there's more that Jesus said, and let's go ahead and look at it. It's in verses 3 and 4. So Matthew chapter 7, verses 3 and 4. Here's what he said. And if you could, pay close attention to the question in this verse, in these verses. So Jesus says this, and why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but do not consider the plank in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, let me remove the speck from your eye, and look, a plank is in your own eye? Now here is another great question by our Savior. In fact, I think I've mentioned this before. It'd be neat to write a book. Not that I can do that, but somebody can write a book just about the questions that Jesus asked. So here's a question that Jesus asked, and the question is why? That is to say this, why is it that we're even looking at a speck in our fellow man's eye? That's the question. So let me just kind of say that again. Why is it that we're even looking at the speck in our fellow man's eye? And that's a great question. In fact, I've noticed this about myself, because I go through these things where I start picking on people and being critical, and I've come to realize that's a red flag for myself. Because when I do that, I think that it's telling me that something's not quite right in my own life. So I just think that's important. So this is a really penetrating question. What Jesus says here, when we're looking critically at a very small thing about our brother, and we don't even realize that there's something very much more serious, a much more serious flaw in our own life. Isn't that interesting? I think it is. I just think it's great. In fact, I would just say this, it cuts right to our heart, or to my heart. So it's a revealing about our own glaring faults and problems and flaws, you might say. So when we can get the plank out of our eye, and this is, I think, is just a great thing that Jesus says, if we could ask God to help us. Because we can't, listen, it's so easy to see the flaws in other people, but it's so difficult to see the flaws in our own life. So if we could, by God's help, be able to remove the plank, the big old board, the obviously glaring flaw in our own eyes, if we could do that, then wouldn't it be so much better, because we'd be able to see much clearer. And as we begin to see much more clearer, I believe that we would see in other people, we would be able to see and look at other people with a lot more mercy and understanding and compassion. I just think it is. I know as a young fella, as a young minister, man, I used to be critical of people. And I'm not saying I'm not that way sometimes today, and I used to just not cut anybody any slack. But it just seems like the older I've gotten, the more, I don't know, the more forgiving I want to be to other people, because I just think I need to be forgiven. Well, let's look at one more passage, and this passage kind of goes along with what we've been saying, and this is in verse 5, Matthew chapter 7, verse 5. Jesus says, hypocrite, first remove the plank from your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. That's what I was talking about. I hate the word Hypocrite. I've never liked that word. It's just not it's one of my least favorite words. What is a hypocrite? A hypocrite is someone who pretends to be something. We're pretending to be something that we're not. And boy, I don't want to be a hypocrite, but when I really think about it, isn't it true that all of us, at one time or another, or sometime in our life, we played the hypocrite? I just think that that's probably true. But to me, here's what I get out of this passage, that it's a really good thing. And we want to ask the Lord to help us to judge our own lives more closely. And if we could do that, that'd be such a blessing. And to look at it, just be more carefully aware of our own flaws and more forgiving in other people's. And I think it would just help us to see people in a different way. I hope this lesson's helped you. But I just have to say, I get so tired of people using that phrase, "You're not supposed to judge." Listen, we all judge. But let's be compassionate to one another. We appreciate you tuning in today. Hope you have a really good week, and join us next time.